Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hoge, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
Hello, this is AJ, and welcome to the Effortless English Show, the show that teaches you to speak English powerfully. Recently, in fact last month, I was on a 2-month trip to Asia. So I was traveling through Nepal, Thailand, and Cambodia, and it was a fantastic trip. Now, part of this trip was a volunteer experience. For 1 week, I volunteered in villages in the mountains in Thailand. And I thought that the trip was going to be about nature and elephants. That's what the description said when I signed up. So Kristen and Joe from Learn Real English, my best friends, they also went. So we all went on this trip. We thought we were going to go to a couple villages and go hiking with elephants through the jungle. And we did do that a little bit. However, what we didn't know was that they also wanted us, as volunteers, to teach English to small children in the villages. So, of course, I'm an English teacher, but I was on vacation, and I really didn't want to do it. And for a few different reasons. I think the main reason I didn't want to do it is I knew that they would be using this kind of old methods, that I was only going to be able to do it, one short class with these children. They didn't speak hardly any English, and I just knew it was a situation where there was very little chance for success. And sure enough, we go the first night, and we go to this little school. And each of the volunteers, we get a little group of kids. And actually, Kristen, Joe, and I ended up with one group of kids. They were about 6 or 7 years old. And no, they didn't really speak any English at all. So we didn't really know what to do. We had no time to prepare. So I thought, well, I'll do some actions. We'll just, stand up, sit down, teach with actions. So we don't need any translation. So right as we're about to start teaching this way, the coordinator of the volunteers, the guy kind of in charge, he comes over and he asks one of the students to stand up, please stand up. So this kid stands up. He's 7 years old, maybe. So I'm just watching like, okay, what's going on? And he says, what is your name? To the kid. And the kid says, the kid's really kind of shy, embarrassed. He's standing and all the other kids are giggling, kind of laughing, and watching him. And he's looking at us, of course, so these 3 weird foreigners are looking at him too. And so, he very quickly, my name is Bao. But it really sounded more like, my name is Bao. Which I thought was perfectly fine. He's 7 years old, barely knows any English at all. So, of course, I immediately, oh, good job, yay, great. Well, the coordinator says, no. My name is Bao. Correcting his pronunciation, right? So he says, say it again. Say again. What is your name? And so now the kid's getting nervous, right? Because he's being corrected in front of everybody. The other kids are kind of laughing nervously again. Probably thinking, thank God it's not me. And I'm starting to feel weird too, because I hate this kind of teaching. I know what's happening. I've seen it so many times in other classes. So the kid says, my name is Bao. And so again, yay, me and Kristen and Joe, oh, good job. And I'm thinking, let the poor kid sit down, please. But no, not good enough. Again, the main coordinator, the main teacher says, no. My name is Bao. And he looks at the kid. What is your name? And now the kid is getting really embarrassed. Because honestly, he's a little 7-year-old kid. He's super low English, basically 0 level English. He can't hear the difference. He cannot hear the difference between what he's saying and what the teacher's saying. So again, he tries, but now he's kind of shrinking. You can see his shoulders start going down, and I can see he wants to just hide, but he can't. He's sitting there. The teacher's looking at him. We're all looking at him. All his little friends are looking at him. And so he tries again. My name is Bao. And the teacher, no. My name is Bao. And at this point, I'm starting to get angry because I hate this kind of teaching. He's embarrassing the kid, making the kid feel terrible. The kid's becoming super frustrated, embarrassed, and kind of even afraid. And so I'm just kind of, inside I'm just, I'm kind of holding in my anger because I want to say, this sucks, stop doing it. So I start kind of looking down at the floor, and Kristen and Joe, they're doing the same thing. Or we're kind of looking at each other like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is kind of like the worst possible way to teach English. And so the teacher does it again, my name is Bao. And the kid, my name is Bao. And he's getting more and more embarrassed. And then finally I just speak. I'm saying, okay, yeah, that's good. So let's start the class now. And so me and Joe and Kristen sort of interrupt finally. And the main guy finally goes away. And then we do our class. But awful. What a terrible experience for that kid. So I talked about, in the recent webinar, I talked about this idea of creating positive feelings about English, connecting strong positive feelings to English, to listening to English and speaking, so that every time you speak English, you feel strong, you feel confident, you feel relaxed and happy. Well, what happened in that class in the village was the exact opposite of all of that. And unfortunately, it's what happens in most traditional classes. And what that teacher was doing, and I'm sure the teacher didn't realize it. The teacher thought that he was, helping the student get better pronunciation or something. That, in the teacher's mind, I'm sure that's what they were thinking. But what the teacher was actually doing was creating these terrible negative feelings, right? Of embarrassed because standing in front of these foreigners and standing in front of their friends and being corrected and again and again and again. So terrible feelings of embarrassment, frustration because the child simply could not hear the difference. The child thought they were saying it correctly, but then the teacher kept saying, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. But there was no way at that child's level, no way for them to hear the difference. They needed more time. So there's nothing that could be done by that child to say it perfectly. They weren't going to do it. So it was just every time more and more frustration, an impossible situation. The teacher created an impossible situation for that student. A little bit of, fear probably, just, of the teacher, of us, of being judged, of failing, and very powerful. Each time with each correction, I could see that the negative feelings were getting stronger and stronger in that child. They were sort of shrinking down even more, and you could tell they just wanted to sit down and hide and never speak English again, probably. And that's what happens in schools so often. It happens day after day after day, week after week after week. More and more negative feelings, more and more embarrassment, more and more feelings of failure, more and more feelings of frustration attached to, connected to English. And this is why we find that most people who have studied English in schools for several years feel extremely nervous about speaking English. And even though they may have memorized a lot of vocabulary and grammar, they can't use it well because all of those negative feelings come up and they block the ability to speak well. It's terrible, and it was really hard to see it happening right in front of my eyes to such a young child. I hope that child will have some positive experiences with English in the future and change some of those feelings. But if not, that kid probably will never learn to speak English. And probably that kid will grow up hating English class, and wanting to avoid English as much as possible. And that's, in my mind, the tragedy of it all. What's happening in schools is that they're training people to avoid English. I mentioned in the last webinar, how I see this in Japan all the time. I'm in Japan, where I am right now. I'm surrounded by people who have studied English for 4, 5, 6 or more years, starting in middle school for 3 years, then in high school for 3 or 4 years, that's 6 years, and if they go to university, another year or 2, 6, 7, 8 years of English, but they are, most of them, terrified to actually use it. Why is that? Well, because they had the same kind of experiences as that child. Again and again and again, they've had to stand up, they've had their errors corrected publicly. They felt embarrassed and nervous. They felt frustrated because they couldn't give the right answer. They couldn't say the right pronunciation. They weren't able to at their level. And so all this terrible stress just gets built up and connected to English. And it goes very, very deep. Until finally, as I said, most people don't even want to try. This happened to me with Spanish. I learned Spanish in high school and for a couple of years, and then again in university for a year. And I couldn't speak it at all at the end of it. I just wanted to avoid Spanish. I was really embarrassed about it. I had all these kind of negative feelings about it. Didn't want to try at all to communicate in Spanish. Felt impossible. It's like my brain just turned off if I heard Spanish. Let's go to a Twitter question. I want to come back to this point about error correction because it's a common request. It's a misunderstanding that a lot of people have, including learners. And we really need to be clear about error correction and how do we deal with errors when learning English or when teaching English. So first to Twitter. We got a question here. Actually, it's a comment, more of a comment than a question. Mancower says, AJ, I never studied grammar too well, and I thought that I made a lot of mistakes, but your rule number 2 relieved me. Thank you for making English learning more fun. You're welcome. This is related to really what I was just talking about the story I was just talking about. That if we don't make English fun, if we don't make English relaxing, if we don't build feelings of confidence, then we create learners who hate English or who fear English or who are nervous about English and who cannot actually communicate. We have to remember that communication is the very first thing. You can communicate even if your grammar is terrible, even if you don't have a lot of vocabulary, even if your pronunciation is so-so. You can still manage to communicate. And this is the level I'm at in my Spanish. My grammar's horrible. My vocabulary, so-so, not very good. My pronunciation, so-so. But you know what? For the first time in my life, I can actually communicate. I'm not afraid to try to communicate. Even if just with 1 or 2 words at a time, like a baby. And that is the whole point of language. Language is a tool for communication. Not some academic thing that we must study and take lots of tests on. It doesn't matter what your test scores are. If you can't communicate, then you're not a good English speaker, and it doesn't matter what the test score says. One more Twitter question, shall we? Okay, Mad Letter asks, how can I get your podcast? Well, this show, this Effortless English show, is actually broadcast, published in a few places, actually. On my YouTube channel, you can watch the video. And I also put that video onto the Effortless English Club blog. So you can always go to effortlessenglishclub.com and, go to the bottom menu at the bottom of the page and click on the blog. And there you'll find the show. That's one way you can do it. I also will take out the audio only, no video, and I put that on iTunes, my iTunes podcast. So it's the same content, but it's just the audio. Some people prefer just audio. It's smaller files. Or if you're walking around the city, you don't really want to be watching a video the whole time. It's easier just to have audio. So go to iTunes and go to podcasts. And then in the podcast, just search for Effortless English, AJ Hoge. Do that, you'll find my podcast, and you can subscribe to it. And when you subscribe to it in iTunes, then every time there's a new show, it will automatically be sent to your computer or phone or whatever. So, 2 ways. All right, let's get back to this question of error correction. Now, I mentioned it's a big misunderstanding, and it's a misunderstanding by both teachers and students. I think it starts with teachers. Teachers have the idea that they must correct every student error. Right? This is part of the mentality of schools of correction and grading, that we always have to be giving out a score. You get an A, you get a B, you have 95%, you have 72%, oh, and you failed because you only have 50%. And this is the mentality of schools. We all know about this mentality. This need to attach a number. This need to grade and score all the time. It's quite unnatural, and I think it destroys the natural learning process, but it's the mentality of schools. Well, from this mentality then comes this idea that errors must always be corrected. We cannot let an error happen. We've got to correct it every time. And so many teachers, when they hear students speak, they can't stand it. They can't tolerate an error. So if a student makes a mistake, such as yesterday I go, using the wrong verb tense, many teachers will say, no, past tense, yesterday I went. And the teacher thinks they're helping the student speak more correctly. Here's the thing. There's actually a lot of research about this. I'm not a researcher myself, but I've read a good number of research studies. Dr. Stephen Krashen is a researcher that I respect a lot, and he's done a study of all the research on error correction. What he found is this: it doesn't work. Makes no difference. In other words, let's say we have one student, and every time that student speaks, we correct their errors. Every time they make a mistake with their verbs, we correct them. Every time they make a bad pronunciation mistake, we correct them. Then we have another student, and we just ignore their mistakes. We just let them talk. We just talk to them. They make a mistake. We ignore it. We let them just keep going. We do this for 6 months. Then at the end of 6 months, we test each of them. We test their grammar correctness. We test their pronunciation, vocabulary. Test anything you want. Guess what we find? No difference. No difference between the two. In other words, the student that got all their errors corrected constantly, they do not improve any more than the student whose errors were completely ignored. Isn't that interesting? It's just not effective. It doesn't work because while you're in the middle of speaking, someone corrects your error. You're trying to speak and then someone's telling you to correct an error. It just doesn't register in your mind. It's not the way to learn correct grammar or correct speaking. And in fact, it actually hurts because what happens is the student that gets corrected all the time, they start becoming more and more nervous. They start thinking more, right? They start worrying more about making mistakes. So instead of just communicating as best they can, the student that we correct starts getting, oh no, wait. They start to hesitate. Their speaking becomes slower because now they're constantly thinking, am I going to make a mistake? Oh wait, is this the correct verb? Yesterday I, and then they stop and they think, is it go, is it went? Go, is it went? Oh wait, no, it's, And then it actually kind of locks up their brain. The student that does not get corrected, they just speak as well as they can at the time. If they're low level, yes, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. It happens. Small children, they also make a lot of mistakes when they're speaking. They don't care too much about it. Nobody corrects them every time they make a mistake. And so they learn to speak in a more natural, quick way. So how do you learn to speak more correctly? If error correction doesn't work, someone telling you that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that doesn't help. So what does help? One more Twitter question, and then I'll come back and answer that question. Okay, let's see. This is interesting. Noah, and then a bunch of numbers, says, I want to know all the phrases that native speakers use in daily life. All the phrases. Okay, that's a big task. Let's talk about this a little bit, because there is a little bit of a perfection mentality. I think this also comes from schools, and some people just have this anyway. And the idea is that I must be perfect, exactly like a native speaker, and that means perfect. But let me tell you something. Native speakers are not perfect. British people, Americans, Canadians, Australians, etc. They make mistakes when they speak too. I make mistakes when I speak. I've just recently read some little article on the internet, and unfortunately right now I can't remember where I read it or who wrote it. But basically it was a study of native speakers and of speaking and of how many mistakes people make, during a day. And it was a large number. It was, I think it was over 100, that the average person makes over 100, grammar mistakes, pronunciation mistakes when speaking. And these are native speakers, Americans, Canadians, etc. People who grew up from a baby speaking English, and they're making over 100 mistakes a day when they speak. So you need to get this out in your head very clearly, that speaking like a native speaker does not mean perfect, because native speakers are not perfect. I do it. I've done it many times speaking on a stage, standing in front of 100 people or 1,000 people or 3,000 people. And I'll be talking quickly, I'm thinking about the ideas, I'm communicating, and I'll make a quick mistake, a little grammar mistake or something. Or what often happens is I'll start a sentence and then I'll stop and then I'll break it in half and then I'll start a new sentence, so an incomplete sentence. All kinds of things like this. I'll mispronounce a word. For example, the word regularly. Regularly. That's a tough word to pronounce. A lot of native speakers have a tough time pronouncing it. And sometimes if my mouth's dry or something, I'll pronounce it incorrectly myself. So the point here is that forget perfection. Forget knowing everything, knowing all the phrases that every native speaker uses. That's impossible. I don't even know that. There are, millions and millions and millions of native English speakers from many different countries. And each of them, uses different idioms, different slang. There's no way to know it all. So instead of thinking of this idea that, I gotta be perfect to be like a native speaker, you don't. You want to have very clear pronunciations? Sure. You want to mostly have correct grammar? Definitely. And most of all, you want to be fluent and confident and relaxed when you speak so that it comes out quickly, you're not thinking, you're not translating. But forget perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Always. Native speakers make mistakes, so will you. You will never know all the vocabulary. No one does. All right. Let's get back to this idea then, error correction. And we know, let me tell you, tip number 1, don't ask somebody to correct your errors, please. Students used to do this to me all the time. AJ, when I talk to you, please correct my errors. I've had students do that. I've even had friends do that, friends who are not native speakers. And I always say, no, I'm not going to do that, sorry. It doesn't work. I try to tell them about the research. It's also just annoying, right? It completely destroys a nice, natural conversation. If I'm talking to you in English, I just want to chat with you and hear your ideas and share ideas together and have a nice talk. Okay, not every 5 minutes or every 2 minutes or every 30 seconds, I don't want to say, oh, no, wait, you're using the wrong verb tense. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong preposition. Ugh, yuck, it's terrible. You know, in my book, I talk about this. Never ask a native speaker to do this. Don't do it. You're not going to improve your English, and you're going to lose a friend because they're not going to want to talk to you. They don't want to be treated like your free English teacher. Yeah. Just communicate. Just do the best you can. So I know your next question is, well, AJ, then, how do I improve? Good question. Glad you asked it. How you improve is by more listening and more reading. What do you listen to? You listen to correct native English. What do you read? Correct native English. See, your brain is smart. You've got to trust your brain. It just needs time, that's all. Okay, you can't instantly become perfect and fluent. It takes time. But the more you read books, especially reading books, for example, you're reading books, you're seeing correct English, you're seeing correct sentences, you're seeing correct grammar again and again and again and again, and it will start to sink in more and more and more. It's the same with listening. The more you listen to native speakers, the more you hear correct pronunciation, the more you hear correct spoken grammar. And little by little, your brain naturally, intuitively, without you really trying too hard, will start to realize, that's how you say it. That's the correct way. And little by little, your grammar will improve. Little by little, your pronunciation will improve. And your listening ability and your fluency and all of these things. Now, we all know this with children. If you talk to a small child, you don't correct every single one of their mistakes. It would take forever. Children don't learn that way. They learn by copying their parents or the television or other relatives, other family members, right? This is how they learn and get better and better and better with their language. They don't need somebody following them around correcting every one of their mistakes. No. So, error correction. Don't be like that little child in Thailand and make yourself into some embarrassed, nervous, stressed out English speaker. You don't want to be that way. Relax, do the best you can. Don't worry about mistakes. Always keep in your mind that native speakers make mistakes too. Every single day, many mistakes. So if you make some mistakes, so what? We all do. All right, finally, a little bit of news, Effortless English news. First of all, my audiobook is almost ready. I keep saying that, but it really is almost ready. Just a few days away, and my audiobook finally will be ready. My book is already available on Amazon. Just search Effortless English by AJ Hoge. But lots of people are asking about the audiobook because they want to read the book and listen to it at the same time, which is a great idea. Well, the audiobook will be available very soon. Just go to my Twitter or watch your email. When the audiobook is available, I'll send out an email to everybody, all the subscribers, and I'll give you a link where you can go and get the audiobook. No problem. Second piece of Effortless English news. We're having a member meeting, a VIP and ACC member meeting in Barcelona, June 6th and June 7th. What kind of meeting? We're just going to meet and have fun and talk in English for a couple days. That's it. No classes, no teaching. We're probably just going to have lunch together, have dinner together, maybe go for a walk around Barcelona. Just chat and talk and meet each other. We've done this a couple times in the past. It's wonderful to meet face to face. So if you think you maybe can make it to Barcelona, June 6th and June 7th, book a hotel downtown, somewhere in downtown Barcelona. Book your plane ticket, and I'll have details coming soon. Again, I'll email those to VIP and ACC members. And I'll tell you where we're going to meet and what time and all that. but the dates are already confirmed now. June 6th and June 7th, confirmed. Our member meeting in Barcelona, Spain. All right, that is all. Good luck to you. Just get out there and communicate. Don't worry about your mistakes. You will get better with time. Keep listening, keep reading, keep using the lessons, and most of all, communicate and enjoy it. I'll see you again. Bye for now.